Me too.
You too? Listen. What happened? Can you hear me now? Good? All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to night 2 of VBS for the adult lesson. And tonight we're going to be going over Saved from Chaos. And we're going to be going through 3 different books of the Bible, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. To be more specific, Matthew 8:23 through 27, Mark 4:35 through 41, and Luke 8:22 through 25. Now these 3 books of the Bible are called the Synoptic Gospels. They kind of all 3 tell a story together from different perspectives. And this is 3 of the books that atheists will use a lot of times to try to say there's contradictions in the Bible because one person's story doesn't quite match up with the other person's story. But this actually just shows even more how accurate the Bible is, because their stories might be slightly off by just maybe an account of how many people was in the crowd or so and so forth or whatever. But there's still, the point of the message is still there. And whenever God repeats something in Scripture, it's really worth slowing down and asking why. And so Jesus crossed the Sea of Galilee and he said, let's go to the other side. And a big storm came up and kind of interrupted everything, and some people got scared or whatnot. So that's what we're going to be going over. So just to set the scene a little bit, Jesus had already been teaching all day. And he was tired, and the evening came, and he gave a simple command. In Mark 4:35, Jesus says, let us go to the other side. Notice Jesus didn't say, let's see if we can make it. Very comparable in size and the feel of the Sea of Galilee. It's not an ocean, and from many places, massive body of water. But this body of water, I mean, it's big, but it wasn't massive, right? Like we weren't.
The sea is a lot smaller than an ocean.
That's right. That's right. Sea is a lot smaller than an ocean. But, when I grew up and I hear sea, I think that's a big mass, in my mind just automatically goes to like the Atlantic or the Pacific. But this was just a big lake, essentially. So it should have been just a routine trip by men who have done these types of trips many times over. These were not inexperienced men. I know sometimes we hear this story and we picture the disciples as 12 men who had never been on a boat before, but that's just not true on this boat, which makes this story even more significant. Jesus said, let us go to the other side. And while they were traveling, a storm appeared out of nowhere. I imagine they were probably somewhere in the middle. They had already made it halfway across, because if they were really close to the shore, they wouldn't have been so scared, right? If they had just set sail, or if they were really close to the other side, they wouldn't have, this storm wouldn't have bothered them as bad because they could swim to land. But they were probably about in the middle. And it's just like that in life. As soon as you have a plan, as soon as you set goals, as soon as you begin to do what God has told you to do, here comes a storm, a distraction. The enemy tries to put up roadblocks to stop you, at the very least, to discourage you. Now, this wasn't just a regular thunderstorm. It was bad. This was a faith-busting storm. Each gospel writer adds another piece to the story. Matthew 8:24 says, the ship was covered with waves. The waves wasn't simply splashing over the side. They were crashing over the boat until it disappeared beneath them. Mark 4:37 adds, the wave beat into the ship so that it was now full. So that means the boat was taking on water. The boat wasn't just getting wet, it was sinking. Every wave brought them closer and closer to going under. Luke 8:23 says, they were filled with water and they were in jeopardy. Word jeopardy means that they were in real danger. This wasn't just panic over rough weather. These were experienced sailors who believed they were about to die. Then Mark quietly adds one more detail that we often overlook. Mark 4:36 says, there were also other little ships. So Jesus and his disciples weren't the only ones on the water that evening. Other boats had followed him, just like how the masses followed Jesus everywhere he went. When he set sail with the disciples, a bunch of other people got in smaller boats and started going with him. They wanted to see where he was going. They followed him everywhere. So imagine being in one of those smaller boats, watching the same faith-busting storm roll in. And the Bible doesn't tell us much about the other boats, but I imagine it was something like being in a John boat, going through a hurricane. And those other boats didn't have Jesus physically in their vessel, yet they experienced the same wind and the same waves. Sometimes the storms we find ourselves going through can often affect people around us. Our families, our friends, our church, co-workers, and complete strangers. When Hurricane Hugo hit Charleston, we weren't directly hit by the storm, but we still felt the winds and the rains. All the way out here in Conway, when you go through a storm, the people around you can still get hit by the wind and rain. Even though they aren't going through the storm the way you handle your storm, can sometimes have a greater effect on the people around you than the actual storm did. Now, this storm was bad, like really bad. It was pure chaos. I mean, think about how bad it must have really been for what it took for those fishermen, those experts, to go wake Jesus. These men who had been through storms on the sea before. Again, these were fishermen who were used to fishing in this body of water. So to think that they had never seen a storm before is just, I don't know, like they would have had to, right? They've seen these type of storms pop up, but this one was bad. They know how to lower sails. They know how to work the oars. They knew how to bail water. They knew what to do. These men were very, very experienced. But eventually they reached the point where all their experience wasn't enough. And that's when they went to Jesus. When the disciples finally woke, their words revealed just how overwhelmed they actually had become. Matthew records, the disciples said, "Lord, save us, we perish." Luke simply says, "Master, Master, we perish." And Mark says, "Master, carest thou not that we perish?" As if Jesus wouldn't care. These weren't calm requests for help. These were desperate cries for men who believed death was moments away. Jesus stood up in the middle of the chaos. Mark 4:39 tells us he arose and rebuked the wind and said unto the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased and there was a great calm. Imagine that moment. The wind had been screaming, the waves crashing, the rain pounding the boat. The disciples were yelling and running around frantically in the chaos, and Jesus spoke 3 words, "Peace, be still." Immediately the wind stopped and the waves flattened. The same voice that spoke the universe into existence spoke to creation again. Outside had become a storm inside of the disciples. Their hearts weren't just turbulent, their hearts were just as turbulent as the seas. The fear was louder than the wind. The panic had caused them to forget what Jesus had already commanded them to do. Let us go to the other side. The physical storm wasn't their greatest problem anymore. Their greatest problem was that they had forgotten the plan. And how often do we do the same? God gives us a promise. He gives us direction. He opens a door. And then out of nowhere, a storm arrives. And suddenly we begin acting as though God's plan has been canceled or changed. Our prayers change from, "Lord, thank you for leading me," to, "Lord, don't you care?" He promised us, "Peace, be still." Our circumstances has become louder than His promises. "Peace, be still." Yeah, but the noise from the world is so loud and distracting. Peace, be still. Yeah, but I don't think that I can do it. Peace, be still. This storm that I'm going through is just too much for me. Does God care that I'm about to perish? Don't you care that I'm about to die? I can't do it. Peace, be still. Philippians 1:6 says, the good work that God has started in you, He will see it to completion. So peace, be still. He's already started it. Let's go to the other side. He's already commanded it. Peace, be still. See, the destination didn't change. The plan didn't change. God didn't change. He's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Peace, be still. When Jesus says, peace, be still, He's not only demonstrating His authority over nature, He's also inviting the followers to trust Him enough for their hearts to become as calm as the sea that He just rebuked. Sometimes God allows us to reach the end of our own ability, so we realize just how much we actually need His. As long as Peter, who was on the boat, thought that Peter could fix it, he kept working. It was only when Peter knew that Peter couldn't fix it that he cried out to Christ. And that sounds a lot like us. We try our knowledge, we try our money, we try our connections, we try our strength. We try. It's only after we've exhausted everything else do we finally go to Jesus. And in most cases, we put Him in the back of our boat. You know, in that story, it says Jesus was asleep in the hinder of the boat. As the hinder means in the back. And in most cases as Christians, that's what we do. We put Jesus in the back of our boat, only going to Him when we have a storm, saying, don't you care that I'm about to perish? Peace, be still. We put Him in the back of our hearts, in the back of our boat, when in reality, He needs to be the one driving it. We just only call it on Him when we need Him. Never to give praise and worship to Him, or just to give Him thanks for the miracles that He's already performed in our lives daily that we just take for granted. But that's a whole nother message for another day. The disciples were running around in the midst of the chaos because the distraction of the storm had made them forget the plan. They went from we're going to the other side to we're going to die. And Jesus said, peace, be still. And the waves and the wind stopped right then. And the disciples looked at one another in amazement. I imagine when the winds and the waves stopped, the disciples stopped right where they were at too, because it says they were in amazement. And I imagine they stopped and looked at one another, and they also had become still. Matthew says they marveled. Mark says they feared exceedingly and asked, what manner of man is this that even the wind and the sea obeys Him? Luke says, who then is this? For He commanded even the winds and the waters to obey Him. The wind had never obeyed Peter. The waves had never obeyed John. No fisherman had ever spoken to a storm and watched it instantly surrender. Only the Creator can command the creation. And He said, peace, be still. And it was so. Jesus never worried. While the disciples were panicking, Jesus was asleep. Not because He didn't care, but because He wasn't concerned. He knew something that they had already forgotten. He had already said they're going to the other side. The storm never changed God's destination. The waves never canceled His promise. The wind never surprised Him. Jesus didn't wake up wondering what to do. He already had the answer. We're going to the other side. And if God says we're doing something, we're doing it. You know, Jonah and the whale, Jonah tried to run from the whale, or tried to run from going to Nineveh. God sent a whale to swallow him up. Said, nope, I need you back over here. You know, because what God has said is going to happen is going to happen. So, excuse me. Life brings storms. Sometimes the waves cover our boat. Sometimes our hearts feel like they're filling with water. sometimes we're in real jeopardy. Sometimes the people around us are suffering because of our storm. The question isn't whether storms will come. Jesus never promised a storm-free life. He promised that He would never forsake us during the storm. We often are too focused on the storm when we should be focused on the destination that God has already set before us. If God has called you somewhere, if He has given you a promise, if He has made you for a purpose, and He has, if Jesus has said, let's go to the other side, then you can trust that the same Savior who commands the destination also commands the winds and the waves. So, closing challenge, ask yourself, am I looking at the size of my storm, or am I looking at the size of my God? Am I focused on the winds and the rain, or on God's promise? Have I been relying on my own experience instead of calling on Jesus? Have I forgotten what God has already told me? Do I have Jesus in my boat? And if not, then you need to ask Him to get in it. Ask Him what's the plan and listen carefully. Because tomorrow isn't promised, and if you face life's final storm without Jesus in your boat, then it's going to be too late. God's promises are real. Put your faith in Him. Let Him calm the chaos in your life. Allow Him to command the winds and the waves of the storms you face, and He will say, peace, be still. Thank you.
And we have a habit of using God as a spare tire instead of a steering wheel.
That's right.
I've heard people say God is my co-pilot. If He is, switch seats.
That's right.
Because God needs to be the pilot.
That's right.
He's the one that needs to be in control of whatever's going on.
Control of everything. And we put Him first and foremost.
Sometimes we stand in the way of what God's trying to do in our lives.
That's right.
By being unthankful. And the first words out of your mouth should be thanking the Lord before you ever ask Him anything.
That's right.
And but see, what these guys were doing, they knew Jesus was in the bottom of the boat sleeping, but they had their eyes on the circumstances.
That's right. They were focused on the storm. They weren't focused on Jesus.
Put our eyes on the circumstances.
That's right.
And not on what God can do.
That's right.
If God leads you to it, He's going to lead you through it.
That's right.
No, He's going to give you the means to get through whatever trial He's put you through. Sometimes, because all of us are going to go through storms in our life. It might be a lost loved one, a loved one that's passed away. It might be a temporary financial storm. It might be a sickness. Right now, the doctors say I have cancer. I don't know. I don't know what's going on in there. But God does. So why should I worry about something I don't even know about?
That's right.
That's right.
I'll let God handle it.
Yep.
I don't worry about it. There's no use to worry about it. God's in control of it. He'll take care of it one way or the other.
That's right.
I'm not saying that for y'all to just say, well, no, he thinks he's something. No, Luke knows.
No, I think my God is something.
God.
I'm nothing.
I have the faith to believe that God's going to heal me.
That's right.
Because I haven't harassed near the people that I want to harass. Well,
that's the thing is the closer you get to God, the more challenges are going to get in your way. The more storms are going to come up. New level, new devil. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just going to happen. That's just the way it is.
Well, the closer you get to God, the more the enemy's going to throw.
That's right. He's going to throw everything at you, including the kitchen sink.
No. When you pray, God will put angels in front of you.
That's right.
He'll put angels in front. When you pray, if you pray earnestly and you thank Him, thank Him. A lot of people say, well, I don't pray for myself. Well, that's a mistake to start with. They say, I feel like I'm selfish. What does it say in Mark chapter 11? And it says in Matthew, you have not because you ask not. He's talking to you. You have not because you ask not. And in Mark chapter 11, he says, ask, what you will, believe that you receive it, you shall have it. Here he's talking about spiritual things. He's not talking about bringing a car in. But and in Philippians 4:19 says, my God shall supply all your need according to his riches and glory by Christ Jesus. That means he's not going to let you go lacking. Don't matter what kind of storm you're going through. Keep your eyes on God.
That's right.
No, don't put him in the back seat. Don't wait until you get in trouble and say, God, I need your help. Put him in the forefront. No, just treat it like he's not even asleep. We fail